بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. أما بعد. In the previous lesson, we were speaking about the the fact that belief in Qiyamah is a foundational belief, an essential belief in Islam. We spoke about a few verses in that regard. So I believe we went over 3 verses, so we'll continue with the fourth here from Surah Taha. Actually, we covered all of these verses here, I believe. Surah Al-Dhariyat, Surah Al-Tur as well. So we will continue from the next slide. So there are certain verses where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala points to the fact that Qiyamah is very near. In Surah Al-Qamar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. The time of the hour or the moment or Qiyamah is very near and the moon has split. So amongst the signs of Qiyamah is the splitting of the moon. And that happened during Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam's lifetime. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the time of Qiyamah is very near. It may seem that to us, Qiyamah is very far because when Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam split the moon and the year we're in right now, it's been over 1,000 years, 1,400 years or so. So that is, very long for us. However, when it comes to the grand scheme of things, since the creation, the beginning of creation, and to where Qiyamah actually is situated, the time span between Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Qiyamah is very near. In one hadith, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Bu'ithtu ana wa sa'atu kahatin." He said that me being sent and the day of judgment is like these two. And he made a sign with his 2 fingers, his index finger and his middle finger, and he put them together. And he said that my coming and me being a prophet and a messenger and being born and sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means that Qiyamah is this close. So between me and Qiyamah is like these 2 fingers. So in the grand scheme of everything, from all of creation, Adam alayhi salam, all the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam, they knew of the coming of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and that he was the final messenger. So the fact that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam is here means that there is no more risala, no more prophethood, messengers will not come, and the only thing now is for this ummah to finish its course and Qiyamah will come. So in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the splitting of the moon, which was a mu'jiza or a miracle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the next few durus, we will actually see the hadith of the splitting of the moon when we talk about other signs of Qiyam, inshallah. The next verse in Surah Al-Nahl, the first verse of Surah Al-Nahl, أتى أمر الله فلا تستعجلوه سبحانه وتعالى عما يشركون. The command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has come. So do not rush. Do not ask for Qiyamah to come right now, because it is coming. Subhanahu wa ta'ala amma yushrikun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is glorified way more than what and he's way above what they ascribe to him with partners. And what's really interesting here, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to Qiyamah, even in this previous verse, iqtarabati sa'a and ata amrullah. So for those of you who are studying Arabic, you'll notice that these verbs, these fi'ls, are in the past tense. So the actual translation in the Arabic sense, it makes sense, but in English it would be, if you translate it as a past tense verb, it would mean that Qiyamah has already come. Qiyamah came and the moon split. And in this verse, the command of Allah has come. So the reason why in Arabic the past tense is used is to show how certain Qiyamah is and how definite it will be and how near it really is. It's an added emphasis and style of the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the past tense verb to show how definite something is. So if you think about it, if we're using a past tense verb to explain something that will happen in the future, there's nothing more certain than something that already happened, right? The fact that you are alive, there's no one doubting the fact that you're alive because your birth already happened. There is a doubt, will you pass away today, tomorrow? But your birth date, there's absolutely no doubt in that because it's in the past tense. So similarly, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses a past tense verb to explain qiyamah, the coming of qiyamah, it's absolutely certain. And this is one of the beauties of the style that's used in the Quran. The next three verses in Surah Al-Anbiya, اقترب للناس حسابهم وهم في غفلة معرضون. Again, the past tense verb is used. The hisab, or the account for people, has come. They will have to, the day they will have to give account for their actions, hisab, that day has come. وهم في غفلة معرضون, and they are in negligence and they turn away from it. So Qiyamah is right at our doorsteps, and we are involved in all these acts of negligence. ما يأتيهم من ذكر من ربهم محدث إلا استمعوه وهم يلعبون. Anytime a reminder comes from their Lord to them, a new reminder, they listen to it, but they're playing, they joke around. إلا استمعوه وهم يلعبون. They joke around, it doesn't affect them. The nasiha of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the signs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends to us on a daily basis, that qiyamah is coming, it doesn't enter our hearts. لاهية قلوبهم. And the reason why is because their hearts are filled with ghafla and negligence. لاهية قلوبهم. Then the next two verses in Surah Al-Ma'arij, إنهم يرونه بعيدا ونراه قريبا. They think of Qiyamah as far away, however we see it very near. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone knows when Qiyamah is going to happen, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is informing us that it is very near. We don't know when it's going to happen. All we know is that it is near. And in essence, the Qiyamah Sughra, or everyone has their own version of Qiyamah, other than the actual Qiyamah. And that is when you pass away. When you pass away, that is figuratively your Qiyamah. So that is always near. That can happen today, that can happen right now, that can happen in 20 years. But our death is a version of Qiyamah, because after our death, you're placed in your your grave, and the next step is Qiyamah itself. So it is very short. Verses of the Quran regarding the Sa'ah. In Arabic, Sa'ah has a few meanings. It can mean moment, it can mean an hour, it can mean, even they use it for a watch, like a wristwatch or a clock. So a clock is also called a Sa'ah. So here it means the moment of Qiyamah, because it'll happen so suddenly. It'll just be in a brief moment, it'll just happen. There's one hadith where Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says that two people will be, there will be someone selling cloth and someone buying cloth, and then they won't be able to complete their transaction when Qiyamah happens. Another person who is making a pool for himself, a hawb, he's plastering his pool so that he can swim in it, and he'll finish, but he won't be able to swim in it. And that's when Qiyamah will happen. So it just shows you how sudden Qiyamah will be. Everyone will be attending to their daily affairs. It's not like something they expect, or some strange phenomenon that's happening in the world in which everyone's scared, and then Qiyamah happens. It'll happen very suddenly. So these are some verses about the Sa'ah, or Qiyamah, the moment, and the knowledge of its occurrence is only with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So not even Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam knows, as we know from the hadith itself. This is just an added emphasis so that we can see many different verses that emphasize that same point, and some ahadith as well. So this verse here in Surah Al-A'raf, verse 187, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ السَّاعَةِ أَيَّانَ مُرْسَاهَا. They ask you, O Muhammad, regarding Qiyamah and when it'll happen. قُلْ إِنَّمَا عِلْمُهَا عِنْدَ رَبِّي. Tell them that the knowledge of this, the time period of Qiyamah, when it will occur, is only with my Lord. لا يجليها لوقتها إلا هو. No one other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make its time period apparent. Meaning no one else knows other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when its time period will be. ثقلت في السماوات والأرض. This is a very weighty thing upon the heavens and the earth. It's a very uh, momentous occasion, very enormous occasion in the heavens and the earth. لا تأتيكم إلا بغتة. It will not come to you. Qiyamah will not come to you other than in a very sudden manner. All of the sudden, you won't expect it. يسألونك كأنك حفي عنها. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the Arabs and the Ahlul Kitab. They ask you, O Muhammad, about Qiyamah as if you have complete knowledge over it. قُلْ إِنَّمَا عِلْمُهَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. Tell them that the knowledge of Qiyamah is only with Allah. وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. However, most people do not know this. So, a lot of people, meaning out of all of mankind, very few in that time were believers. Everyone else, they thought that, you can find out when Qiyamah was, or Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is claiming that there is a Qiyamah. When is Qiyamah? So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to tell them that he even does not know. And this is basically echoing the statement that he gave to Jibreel alayhi salam, Mal mas'ulu anha bi'a'lama min as-sa'il. The person who is asked regarding its time period has no idea, just like the person who has asked the question. So the next verse in Surah Al-Hijr, verse 85. وَمَا خَلَقَنَا السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ وَإِنَّ السَّاعَةَ لَآتِيَةٌ فَاصْفَحِ الصَّفْحَ الْجَمِيلَ. We have created the heavens and the earth and everything in between with correctness. We have created everything in the correct manner. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows exactly how He created the heavens, the earth, everything in between. He has complete knowledge of everything. وَإِنَّ السَّاعَةَ لَآتِيَةٌ. And the sa'a, the moment of Qiyamah, is coming. فَاصْفَحِ الصَّفْحَ الْجَمِيلَ. So forgive people for their shortcomings. So this is supposed to make us have good character. The fact that we know that Qiyamah is coming makes us realize that our life is short, that we are answerable for our actions, we're accountable for everything that we do, and that should motivate us to do this. فَاصْفَحِ الصَّفْحَ الْجَمِيلَ. Have tolerance and forgive people for what they do. The next verse in Surah Al-Nahl, وَلِلَّهِ غَيْبُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one who has control over the hidden affairs of the heavens and the earth. The ghaib is what is hidden from mankind, such as when these certain actions will occur, even the coming of Isa alayhi salam, the coming of Imam Mahdi, the coming of Dajjal, the Dabbatul Ard, all these signs of Qiyamah. These are all part of the ghaib. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has that ghaib, especially one of the largest things, one of the biggest aspects of ghaib is when will Qiyamah be? وَمَا أَمْرُ السَّاعَةِ إِلَّا كَلَمْحِ الْبَصَرِ أَوْ هُوَ أَقْرَبُ. And the day of judgment, the coming of Qiyamah, will be like the blinking of an eye, or even shorter than that, even nearer than the blinking of an eye. Inna Allah ala kulli shay'in qadir. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has complete control over everything. So here is talking about the coming of Qiyamah will be very sudden, and we can see this throughout all of these verses. And then in Surah Taha, Inna sa'ata atiyatun akadu ukhfiha litujza kullu nafsin bima tas'a. So we spoke about this in the last lesson as well. Verily, the hour of Qiyamah is coming. Akadu ukhfiha. I would have made it a secret. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that. I was going to keep it a secret, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed it so that لِتُجْزَى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا تَسْعَى, so that every soul will be accountable for what it commits or does in terms of deeds. So if we didn't have the knowledge of Qiyamah, we could have had an excuse that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revived us and then we had no idea of Qiyamah, then we can say that I had no idea. I was held accountable for my actions, and that's why I did not follow the Sharia. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed it so that we can be held accountable. So basically all of these verses, they point towards the fact that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has this knowledge. No one other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows when Qiyamah will take place. So there's plenty more verses. Just to show, I'll just go through these very quickly. And if you want to learn these more, you just write the verse name, the surah name, and then the verse number, inshallah. So this verse in Surah Al-Hajj, the first verse, يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم إن زلزلة الساعة شيء عظيم. O people, fear your Lord. Definitely the quakes and the shaking and the earthquakes of Qiyamah is a very enormous event. In Surah Al-Hajj again, verse number 7, وَأَنَّ السَّاعَةَ آتِيَةٌ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهَا وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ يَبْعَثُ مَنْ فِي الْقُبُورِ. The hour or the moment or Qiyamah is coming, there is no doubt in it, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will revive everyone from their graves. Surah Al-Luqman, verse 34, إِنَّ اللَّهَ عِنْدَهُ عِلْمُ السَّاعَةِ وَيُنَزِّلُ الْغَيْثَ وَيَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْأَرْحَامِ وَمَا تَدْرِي نَفْسٌ مَاذَا تَكْسِبُ غَدًا وَمَا تَدْرِي نَفْسٌ بِأَيِّ أَرْضٍ تَمُوتُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلِيمٌ خَبِيرٌ. This verse is very important. This verse highlights many aspects of the ghaib. So there's 5 things mentioned in this verse at the end of Surah Al-Luqman. Definitely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the knowledge of as-sa'a. So that's number 1, Qiyamah. When will that take place? وَيُنَزِّلُ الْغَيْثِ. And He knows when rainfall will occur. So to be absolutely certain of rainfall and different weather patterns, that knowledge is only with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We do have forecasts and we have, predictions, but sometimes they're incorrect. Sometimes they say a 70% chance of rain and it doesn't rain. So they're just predictions, but absolute certainty when the rainfall will happen now, in a year's time, in 2 years' time, when a drought will occur, that is in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَيُنَزِّلُ الْغَيْثِ. So that's number 2. وَيَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْأَرْحَامِ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that which is in the wombs of the mothers. So if a woman is expecting, then the gender of the child, if that child will be born or not, if there will be any complications or not, the fate of that child, everything about that child, the rizq of that child, as we will see inshallah in the 4th hadith, we actually will talk about the fate of mankind. So this is the knowledge which is considered ghaib. Nowadays we do have like sonograms and everything where they can check what the gender of the child, but that's not 100% accurate. And even if it is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows more details that no one else can know. So that's still part of ghaib, the exact information of that child, whether that child will be born or not. And then number 4, وَمَا تَدْرِي نَفْسٌ مَاذَا تَكْسِبُ غَدًا. No soul knows what it will do tomorrow. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that, what you and I will do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already knows what we're going to do. وَمَا تَدْرِي نَفْسٌ بِأَيِّ أَرْضٍ تَمُوتُ. And number 5, no soul knows where they will pass away, in which land, which country, in air, on land, in sea. No one knows where they're going to pass away. This is the knowledge of the ghaib. إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلِيمٌ خَبِيرٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is knowledgeable, He is aware. Next verse in Surah Al-Ahzab, verse 63. يَسْأَلُكَ النَّاسُ عَنِ السَّاعَةِ. People ask you, O Muhammad, regarding Qiyamah. قُلْ إِنَّمَا عِلْمُهَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. Tell them that the knowledge is with Allah. وَمَا يُدْرِيكَ لَعَلَّ السَّاعَةَ تَكُونُ قَرِيبًا. And what do you know if the time of the Sa'ah of Qiyamah is near or not? In Surah Al-Ghafir, verse 59, إِنَّ السَّاعَةَ لَآتِيَةٌ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهَا. Qiyamah is coming, there's no doubt in it. وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. However, most people, they don't believe. In Surah Fussilat, verse 47, إِلَيْهِ يُرَدُّ عِلْمُ السَّاعَةِ. The knowledge of Qiyamah goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No one else other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has that knowledge. وَمَا تَخْرُجُ مِنْ ثَمَرَاتٍ مِنْ أَكْمَامِهَا. And whatever which fruits will become ripe from which flower. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has that knowledge. Which tree will bear fruit, which tree will not bear fruit, when it will come out. Will you have your harvest this year or not? All of this. وَمَا تَحْمِلُ مِنْ أُنثَى وَلَا تَضَعُ إِلَّا بِعِلْمِهِ. And a woman will not expect, nor will she give birth except with the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So before people even find out, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already knows. The next verse in Surah Al-Zukhruf, verse 66. هل ينظرون إلا الساعة أن تأتيهم بغتة وهم لا يشعرون. Are they waiting only for Qiyamah, that it should come to them suddenly and they're not, and they're surprised by it? Is that what they're waiting for? Meaning that they're not accepting Islam, they're not going to do a'mal, they're not getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What are they waiting for other than Qiyamah? So do they wait for something other than Qiyamah, that it should come to them suddenly and they are unaware, they are caught unaware? Then again, Surah Al-Zukhruf, verse 85. وَتَبَارَكَ الَّذِي لَهُ مُلْكُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا وَعِنْدَهُ عِلْمُ السَّاعَةِ وَإِلَيْهِ تُرْجَعُونَ. Blessed be he who has the dominion, the kingdom, the sovereignty over the heavens and the earth, and everything in between. And he has the knowledge of the Sa'ah, and to him you will be returned. You will return to him. Then Surah Muhammad, verse 18. فَهَلْ يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَّا السَّاعَةَ أَن تَأْتِيَهُمْ بَغْتَةً. Do they wait for the hour that it should come to them suddenly? Is that what they're waiting for? Very similar verse in 2 verses above. فَقَدْ جَاءَ أَشْرَاطُهَا. Definitely the signs of Qiyamah have already come. فَأَنَّى لَهُمْ إِذَا جَاءَتْهُمْ ذِكْرَاهُمْ. What will happen to them when it comes to them? Then Surah Al-Qamar, we already talked about this verse. اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. The hour has come and the moon has split. In Surah Al-Qamar again, verse 46. بل الساعة موعدهم والساعة أدهى وأمر. The hour or Qiyamah is a promise to them. That is their appointment. Qiyamah, maw'id, their appointment. And the day of judgment is bitter, and it's is going to be a very difficult day. Okay, so those are so many different verses, and there's many more verses in the Quran. I mentioned this before, but Makki surahs are those verses, or those surahs which were revealed in when Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in Makkah before the Hijrah. And those surahs have a lot of mention of aqaid, meaning belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's divine attributes, Jannah, Jahannam, and especially about Qiyamah. So anyone who's interested in those, then usually the 30th juz, the surahs that are much smaller, those are generally the Makki surahs. So they will contain a lot of information about Qiyamah. So we just had a glimpse of some verses. There's many more in the Quran. So, it's highly encouraged that we read. If we are learning Arabic, then try to understand the Quran through what you have learned through Sarf and Nahu, Arabic grammar. Those who are learning Arabic, try your best. Read the Quran and try to decipher what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to you. Those of us who don't know Arabic, we should have a translation. There's many different kinds that we can read. One that's really nice that I would recommend, I don't know if it's available here, but I have a copy from South Africa, Quran Made Easy by Mufti Afzal Hussein Ilyas. So that translation is really nice, Quran Made Easy. What he did in there is he put a lot of footnotes, like in the brackets. He took Tafsir al-Jalalain and he filled in a lot of the in-betweens in the translations. So it's very smooth and you get a lot of information as well. It's very easy to understand. So that's one that I would recommend. So here, these are other ahadith about the fact that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam did not know when it will occur, when Qiyamah will occur. First one is the ayah, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ السَّاعَةِ أَيَّانَ مُرْسَاهَا قل إنما علمها عند ربي لا يجليها لوقتها إلا هو ثقلت في السماوات والأرض لا تأتيكم إلا بغتة. We already discussed Surah Al-A'raf. It was the first ayah in the previous slide. So here are three hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, narrated by Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma, that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Mafatihul ghaybi khams. The keys to the hidden world, or ghayb, there are five. Mafatih. لا يعلمها إلا الله. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows them. ثم قرأ هذه الآية إن الله عنده علم الساعة. Then Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam recited that verse of Surah Al-Luqman, the one that we just spoke about, the five things. إن الله عنده علم الساعة وينزل الغيث ويعلم ما في الأرحام. That verse, which is the last verse of Surah Al-Luqman. So in this hadith, which is in Sahih al-Bukhari, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that these are the five keys of the ghaib, and no one other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows these. So that includes Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He did not know when Qiyamah will take place, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not have the knowledge of the unseen. There, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did reveal things to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is part of him being the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He told us of events that will happen before Qiyamah. He told us about things that will happen on Qiyamah, such as the Shafa'ah and other aspects. And he told us of events that will happen when we are in Jannah or Jahannam. Na'udhu billahi, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us from that and grant us Jannah without hisab. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was informed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of these events. However, other than what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically informed Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam about, he did not have knowledge of the details of all of these aspects. So this is our essential belief. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself is saying this. The next hadith narrated in Musnad Ahmad, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, أوتيت مفاتيح كل شيء إلا الخمس إن الله عنده علم الساعة. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that I have been given the keys of everything except for five things. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that I know aspects of everything except for these five things. Then he recited that same verse, Surah Al-Luqman, verse 34. And it's narrated in Sunan al-Tirmidhi that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, وكيف أنعم وصاحب القرن قد التقم القرن واستمع الإذن متى يؤمر بالنفخ فينفخ. This is a very scary hadith. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying, how can I ever relax and enjoy the luxuries of dunya when the angel who's in charge of blowing the horn, the trumpet, Israfil, he has put the trumpet in his mouth and he's waiting for the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for him when to blow so that he can blow it. So basically, that trumpet is how the entire universe will get destroyed. It's so powerful, so loud, and this angel has been created only for this purpose. He's one of the greatest angels, and he will blow it, and the entire universe will, be blown to absolutely nothing. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that he has basically, it's in his mouth, he's ready to blow, and he's waiting for the permission from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as soon as he gets permission, he's going to blow, and then that's it. So that's how sudden Qiyamah will be. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had that istihdar and that consciousness, awareness of this, as if he could see him. So then he's saying, how can I ever feel comfortable, feel relaxed when I'm always aware of this? So these ahadith, there's plenty of ahadith which point towards the fact that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not have the knowledge of the ghaib, and amongst that the greatest is knowing when Qiyam will occur. And obviously this hadith which we are talking about in the Al-Arba'in, the second hadith, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam answers Jibreel in a similar manner. Okay, so now we move on to the last question. We were just discussing question number 4, the fact that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam does not know when Qiyamah will take place, and that has been cleared up. It's throughout the Quran, throughout the Hadith. Now we'll go to the signs of Qiyamah. So when Jibreel alayhi salam asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, فَأَخْبِرْنِي عَنْ أَمَارَاتِهَا. Tell me about the signs. So when he was asked regarding the signs of Qiyamah, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned only two in this hadith. There are many more, but in this hadith, he mentioned two. So number one, a slave woman will give birth to her master. And number two, shepherds will compete with one another in constructing large buildings. And تَلِدَ الْأَمَةُ رَبَّتَهَا. And then the second one is with the shepherds. So now what does this first one mean? A slave woman will give birth to her master. There are different interpretations for this. There's a few. These are some of them. There are more interpretations. The ulama have, spared no, interpretation. They've gone in depth with every single hadith and written so much regarding them. If one person was to go and try to just read on one hadith, it would take days just to finish reading the tashrih and the commentary for one hadith. There's so many different commentaries of these great books of hadith. Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, the six famous books. There's more other books as well. And the commentaries just for Sahih al-Bukhari will fill an entire library. So it's just very vast. So these are just a few of the opinions, few interpretations. Number one, what does it mean that a slave woman will give birth to her master? This is an indication to the conquests which will happen after the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So how is that an indication of that? It means that a slave woman will give birth to her master, in that when countries warred and one was defeated by the other, this is how people became slaves in the past. So what would happen is they would fight, and the winning country or group would not kill the women and children, they would take them. So obviously they defeated the enemies, which were all men. The remainder were women and children, and so they wouldn't kill them. So they would have to take them to take care of them. So the survivors of the losing country would be kept alive as slaves and workers for the winning country. This was even in pre-Islamic Arabia as well, and that was the system in the past. So here's a note. This was a system in the past which has been abolished, meaning slavery. Islam does not want slaves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always encourages the believers to set slaves free. However, because the world was filled with slaves and was based on this system of slavery, Islam sought to give them rights and then slowly encouraged the abolishment of slavery. So, they couldn't, slavery could not have been abolished right away, because then it would cause, an uproar, and then people may not have accepted Islam at that moment. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave slaves a lot of rights. They had to eat the same food as the master, have the same clothing, so many rights. So much so that in the Abbasi Khilafat, in that time period, some slaves were way better off than other people. Is really amazing how, they were slaves, but they were more wealthy, more well off than other Muslims. Okay, the second point here: in this manner, Islam managed to give slaves a level of comfort and preserve their rights as humans. If a warrior was killed and his family was enslaved, say for instance they're in a enemy country or something, they were defeated, the entire country was defeated, and some people in the past, they would kill the entire family, the women and children, they would kill them all, and it was very gruesome. But this was a system back then. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that it's impermissible, you have to take care of them. So we use the term slavery, but in reality they were given a lot of rights. So they would go into the Islamic empire and they were given rights there, and you'd have to be very careful on how you treated them. So this slave woman giving birth to her master, this goes to the second point here. So when a slave woman, she was the slave of someone, like the man took her as a slave, she would give birth to her master's child, and then the child was free like the father. So in the ahkam, or the rulings of slavery, Obviously, it's abolished now, so this does not apply to us anymore. But the rules are still there in the books. You can still see the rules, how the slave had rights, what rights they had, the ahadith regarding that, how Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam warned people, if you have a slave, if you did not do justice with that slave, then you would be accountable on the day of judgment. All of that is still there, but it's not applicable in our times right now. So this is saying that when a slave woman gave birth to her master's child, then that child was not a slave. The child was going to be free. So if a man had a slave and then the slave woman gave birth to her child, then the child was going to be free just like the master. So this is what Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is talking about, i.e., meaning that you will basically come across many slaves. And that means that you will fight many different conquests, wars, all of this will happen under the banner of Islam, and then they will come under, basically, the children will be free. So that's the first interpretation there. And then number three, these are all part of one interpretation here. When a woman was a slave and her master had children with her, then she could not be sold. So that's one of the rights there. So a slave woman was treated as a wife, basically. And we know that in Islam, it's permissible to have many wives, up to four. So slave woman was basically had almost all of the rights of a wife. There are very few rights that a slave woman did not have that a wife did have, but practically all of the rights were the same. So if she gave birth, uh, when a woman was a slave and her master had children with her, then she could not be sold. It was impermissible to sell her now. And if the master passed away, then she would be free. This is called a walad. So she would get her freedom. If a slave woman gave birth for a master, it's impermissible to sell her, and she already has her freedom set. As soon as the master passes away, she's free. So in essence, this is a figurative interpretation of the hadith. Her child is the reason why she is promised freedom. So figuratively, she's her master, meaning that he was the reason, or the child is the reason for that woman's freedom. So it's like the slave woman, gave birth to her master. She gave birth to a child, and because of that difficulty she went through, her freedom is promised. So it's as if that child is her master. So that's another interpretation. Number four, this refers to a peculiar incident. It refers to a surplus of slave trade, such that a child of a slave woman will be separated from his or her mother. Then later on in the child's life, they will be freed. However, the mother will still be a slave, and they were separated, so they don't know each other. Then the child will become a slave master and eventually unknowingly own their own mother. So in this manner, the mother will serve her own child unknowingly. So this is, we don't know if it actually happened or not. This is just, theoretical, that a mother and a child, they were taken as, an unfortunate outcome of, prisoners of war. And so they're both slaves, and then they were separated, which actually is not permissible to separate them if there's no other family members, but it could have happened. So the child is separate, grows up separately. The child was freed, and the child became wealthy. And then the child, in turn, owned slaves and didn't realize that he owned his own, his own mother will come under his control. So no one knows if this took place or not, but it's just theoretical. And number five, this actually took place. This refers to when a slave woman will give birth to kings. This actually happened. It was very interesting. In the Abbasid Khalifa, the Khilafa, the Khulafa, the Khalifas, meaning the kings in the Abbasi Empire, um, most of them their mothers were slaves. So their fathers were of royal blood, of Abbasi blood, meaning that their lineage goes up to Abbas radiallahu anhu. So the fathers were of that lineage, but they had slaves, and then they had children from them. And you've heard names such as Harun al-Rashid and all of these people. These are the Abbasis. So there a lot, many of the Khalifas, their mothers were slaves. So, that's how much it wasn't like when we have the idea of slaves in our minds, we think of, a very mazloom, beaten, oppressed people. The slavery in Islam was a bit different. They were given many rights. They didn't have the exact same rights as free people. But remember, like I said, some slaves enjoyed more comforts than rich people, which doesn't mean that, it's right and we have to do it now and stuff like that. Obviously not. But just saying that the rights that were given to slaves in Islam was more than, other cultures and customs. So these women who were the slaves of the Abbasi Khulafa, they gave birth, and those children were the heirs of the king, and they became the next kings. So in this aspect, that woman who gave birth, she was a slave and she gave birth to the next king. And when he's a king over everyone. So that's in this sense talking about the Abbasi Khulafa who came in and this phenomenon happened. Now the sixth one here, this is the most relevant. This is the one that we can take home and we can really practice on. So that a woman is giving birth to her master. So a woman is a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Men are slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala too. In Arabic this is called Ama. So like we have the name Abdur Rahman or Abdullah, a similar name will be Amatullah or Amatur Rahman. So Ama just means a female slave, means the slave of Allah. So all women are the slaves of Allah. So a slave of Allah, a female, will give birth to children who unfortunately will order her around. So that child which was born from this woman is so disobedient and orders the woman around and makes her feel like she's a slave and he is a master or she is a master. So this refers to a lot of disobedience to parents. One thing is if a child is not receptive or the child is rude or that child doesn't obey their parents, that's one thing, It's just a rude child not obeying the parents. Another, which is of a much higher level of disobedience, is that the child commands their mother. So we see this very often in today's time. You know, in the past, maybe a very bad child would be one that just doesn't listen, one that is rude, one that, you know, doesn't listen. But nowadays, what we see is that as well as another level, which is disobedience to parents, in the sense that they command their parents. So it's like the master, the child is like a master. This is the height of disobedience, where not only does the child not obey, but they think of themselves as higher and they make demands. The mother is so oppressed by her own children that she begins to feel like a slave. And this is a common phenomenon today, which is on the rise. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. So this is very dangerous. And this really applies to our times where it's very common the rights of parents are ignored. Parents are not held in high esteem anymore. The rights that Islam has given to parents, if we just read the hadith, would be, amazed at how much rights they have, parents have. In one hadith, this person came to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He was arguing that my father took all of my wealth and he did this and he did that. And so Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam called the father, and then the father related the incident where he did ask for some help and stuff. So then Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, Anta wa maluka li abik. You as well as your wealth belong to your father. So that's how much honor Islam has given to the parents. But in today's time, it's very rare that we will see, even amongst Muslims, that they give those rights to the parents. So this is a great sign of qiyamah, that parents will not be given their rights. So there's many different interpretations for this one sign of qiyamah. I give you a few regarding slavery. And this was obviously in the past. We don't really understand that environment. But this last point, I hope that we can take that and try to, perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will keep us safe if we obey our parents. So this is really a big ni'mah to have parents. In one hadith, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says that their obeying parents will increase one's rizq and extend one's life. So that's really amazing. If you want to have a long and happy life with good sustenance, then obeying parents is one great means to that. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us khair and afiyah, give our parents khair and afiyah if they're alive, forgive them and grant them the highest stages in Jannah without hisab if they have passed away. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us a means of sadaqah jariyah, continuous sadaqah for our parents, so that we can earn them Jannah while we're alive as well. جزاكم الله خيرا وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.